You've probably heard that LLMs can hallucinate, but what if the real problem isn't the model, it's the retrieval system feeding it garbage?
All of the systems that we looked at, the recall is maybe around 60 to 70%. Our goal at Zero Entropy is to bring that up and to have 90% plus recall.
Today, I'm talking with Ghita Alami, the founder of Zero Entropy. Her company is rebuilding search from the ground up to make AI systems dramatically more accurate. We get into early chaos theory, tactical product insights, and bold predictions about the future of intelligent retrieval. So this episode is for you if you're building anything with AI. Rita, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, let's just dive in. I'm so excited. So you heard my own introduction and presentation of what you're building, but tell us about yourself and Zero Entropy. What are you building?
Yeah, for sure. So Zero Entropy is building a high accuracy search engine for RAG and AI agents. So basically, we help developers put better retrieval systems in prod faster. Our product is a simple API, and our goal is to make it super easy for you to upload a bunch of data, unstructured data, any type of document, and then giving you a ranked list of relevant results to any natural language query you might send to the system.
That's so cool. You're just going to help AI be better.
Yeah.
Take us back how it all started. What was the sort of the aha moment? You were like, wait a minute, we can actually feed better data to models and to make the results better.
Yeah, I don't think there was like a clear aha moment. I think it was more built over time. So Nick and I, we both have a math and CS background, and we knew we wanted to help build more reliable AI products. And it was more from talking to many developers, and over time that we noticed that everyone started with a very simple RAG stack, OpenAI embeddings, and then some vector database. And there was always this but, we started with this super simple stack, but it was not accurate enough, but it was not working for our use case, so we did X, Y, and Z. And then we just realized that all of those teams were doing super complex stuff, more and more complex stuff, writing a lot of code that was hard to maintain, that made the system give a higher latency to the system. And we just thought there needs to exist a company that is just going to merge all of this code and provide this search system to everyone behind a simple API. And so that's how Zero Entropy got started.
Can you walk us through a few, let's go with specific examples. I'm an AI company. Take any space. You can take real customers. I'm sure you have many. I know you have many. What exactly is Zero Entropy allowing them to do? What's the real difference from the before and after? You mentioned before it's a lot of small things stitched and patched together, and then you put Zero Entropy API, and that's it. Everything is just faster and less complex. Walk us through some specific examples, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few use cases where if you just do a very simple semantic search, it's not going to work really well. I can give some examples. For example, the first thing that we did is just incorporating hybrid search. More and more teams are doing that too, but having the keyword match along with the semantic search is actually really important because it allows you to find very specific alphanumeric sequences of strings. So for example, if you're looking like in a compliance or KYC use case, if you're looking for like, I don't know, like a very specific big code or some specific code, embedding models are not really trained for that. So it would be hard for you to pinpoint that exact code. It's the same thing for any type of SKUs that you might be looking for. So having that keyword approach is really important. In a legal use case now, we work a lot with contract understanding and legal documents. The problem with those is that if you just do a regular chunking of those contracts, you lose the context of what was this contract even talking about, what was, who were the different parties. And so, for example, we have queries like, give me all of the lease agreements that mention X, Y, and Z. But if you just read the chunk, you don't know if it's a lease agreement or an IP agreement. You don't really know what it's talking about. So that contextualization aspect is also super important. And then, more generally, like if you think of like a medical, like healthcare use case, sometimes the questions are just super complex. So it might be something like a doctor asking for specific symptoms of this patient given this other symptom and this thing that they've tried and their age and many different things. And so embeddings once again are not really good at that, just because it's so much, it's a compound query, composed of many different things. So you almost need to do some like, fuzzy filtering to really find the document or the paper that answers the question. And so this is another use case where it fails. And then, when you think about it, search has been around for a long time, but we still cannot solve for negative queries. So if you're looking for
Hmm.
this but not that, well, actually you're going to, get both of those things, because the keyword and the embeddings are going to match even if you said not, just because there's no understanding. And that's where LLMs are actually pretty useful. It's because they can understand the intent of the query. They maybe can even rewrite it, route it to a specific system that can answer for those. So that's what we're trying to do with zero entropy, is how can you add more intelligence, how can you understand the query better. This is basically what we're trying to solve, but it's definitely a hard problem.
It's it's interesting. I'm listening to you, and I think it's both a hard problem to solve and maybe somehow to explain. Not, I think it's okay, right? There's more complex. So, but I wanted to ask you: is it easy or is it hard to sell because it's sort of highly technical? I feel there's a real pain for the developers who today, without this, are struggling with a bunch of everything. At the same time, it's not a I think you can't really explain it in one sentence. It has to be, it's a little bit more complex product, which is not a bad thing. So how hard slash easy is it to sell? Are you still iterating through that cycle and learning how to sell it easier and better?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it really depends who you're talking to. I think developers who have done it firsthand understand the complexity, and they're usually interested in talking and understanding our approach. They usually find our architecture on our documentation, and they're super interested. So I think it's easy to talk to developers about this. And then for like non-technical audiences, usually our best selling point is basically just the customer support tickets of that company. And I think that's the best metric you can have, especially when you're building AI products, everything is so new. The real feedback is the one that you're getting from your users, right? So usually that's how we can really assess if the product is actually just working. So we've had teams that told us, "Oh no, I think Retrieval works well for us," and then come back a few weeks or a few months later saying, "Well, now users are complaining and it's like not working that well." I think it's just because overall the expectations for AI products are usually higher than what we can actually deliver today. So I think it's going to be more and more important to build just more reliable systems, because now the use cases are kind of fleshed out, so we know what works, what creates value, but now we need to make it work in production for every user. So I guess that's my 2 cents about that. And overall, as you said, retrieval is also hard to evaluate. So that's maybe something we could also talk about. But the evaluation process is difficult. Having good benchmarks is difficult. That adds another layer of complexity to, but is my system even working? How do I really know if it's performing and the way that I expecting it to?
Yeah, can we double click on that? Is that something that you're looking to maybe add to your product as well, an eval to help people, potential customers figure out, well, this is why you need us even more than you thought?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I'm thinking about a lot. I think it's definitely important to, even whether you use zero entropy or not, I think it's important to have a system that evaluates the retrieval step. Just because overall, when there's an LLM that hallucinates, a lot of the time it comes from the retrieval. Either because one, it didn't find the right information to answer the question or to perform the action, or because the context was just not there. And that's also something that you need to know, because you need to improve the knowledge base that you're working with. Or the last thing is, it can, maybe it found the context, but you fed it so much garbage that it just got lost in the context. And then you weren't able to give a useful answer to your user. So I think it's important to be able to debug that, and separately. and then also have evals for your LLM, and the final, output of your product. And so, yeah, we're definitely thinking a lot about that. We've been working with some companies to help them build, benchmarks for their use case. It's definitely a hard task.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. I wanted to, I was listening to you and I was wondering, do you have examples, if you can share them anonymously, of actual hallucinations that some of your customers told you about? Because at some point it becomes a hair on fire problem. If your product is hallucinating live with your customers, it can be critical to have systems in place to prevent that from happening. Do you have sort of horror stories that customers told you about hallucinations or that you heard about?
Yeah, for sure. So I can give an example of a medical copilot company that we're working with. Every time you're talking about healthcare, it's usually pretty high stakes, and so it happens that the copilot just gives like a wrong answer. Thankfully, the doctors are experts in their domain, so usually they can pinpoint that there was a problem somewhere. But if we imagine a world where the AI agents are more autonomous and do things on their own, that's actually the use case that I'm most excited about, because there's less and less like a human in the loop. For a RAG system, you still have like a human reading the answer and like doing the mental vibe check, and they have their critical thinking and their own expertise. But what happens when you have systems that just autonomously do things and improve, that's where actually the horror stories, I think, will really happen.
Hmm. Okay. And there's a very successful YC company in search. It's Algolia. It's so successful, in fact, that one of the founder, Nicolas Desain, came back as a partner. But and you have something else in common with Nicolas. You speak French. You're Moroccan, but you studied in France. And so when you told me you were going to YC, I was like, oh yeah, that's a Nicolas company. You were not with Nicolas at all, and I was quite surprised about that. I think, though, you were in touch, was he helping you and sort of feeding you the secrets of Algolia? And just maybe take us back behind the scenes of YC in your batch. What happened? How was it? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I got introduced to Nicolas before we did YC, actually. So we had a super interesting like 45-minute convo, and a lot of the problems were pretty similar. So it was super insightful, and yeah, learned a lot from him. He was not a partner during our batch because now it's like 4 times a year, so not all of the partners, um, you know, have.
Yeah, they make two or three out of four, and then they can rest and go on vacation and
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah. I guess that's how it works now. So we worked with Harj and Tyler, who were absolutely amazing, and yeah, overall the YC experience was just mind blowing. I think my favorite part was really the accountability and peer pressure, and like just having this community of people like trying to do very hard things, and that really pushed us. Um, I really liked the group office hours where we would meet with 6 or 7 other companies. Then we would have 2-week goals, and then we would write them down and come back 2 weeks later and just make sure that we actually reached those goals. And it was green or red. There's no yellow. And I really like that accountability and having very aggressive goals on a 2-week period. And yeah, I think I really like that mentality. And we're trying to, we're still doing group office hours and trying to keep that spirit going. So yeah, overall, it was a great experience. I think mainly thanks to like the people and the community. And yeah.
You applied several times, right? Because right now it's YC application season. Maybe people watch this later but it's always YC application season now, because it's
Yeah.
every quarter. And so you applied several times before getting in, right?
Yeah. So we applied with Zero Entropy twice. And I also applied a few times before that on like, all sorts of different projects when I was still in school. So yeah, I think they changed the application a little bit, but most of it is still the same.
And that's the beauty of it. You should reapply. You just get better every time. Just filling the application itself gives you clarity on what
Yeah.
you're billing, answering those questions. And even with the Zero Entropy, you applied twice. didn't get in the first time, got in the second time,
Yeah.
and the rest is history. Obviously, Zero Entropy is doing really well. I don't know if you want or can share some metrics about Zero Entropy, but I can tell everyone that it's doing really, really well. I don't know if there's anything else you can say, or we move on to the next question.
I mean, it's on our website if you're curious about like the number of queries that we process, the number of tokens that we index, and the companies using us. So feel free to check us out. We have a new website, by the way, so feel free to check it
Ooh,
out.
website. Okay, what's the is zeroentropy.com or something?
.dev.
Plug it.
Yep.
.dev. Zeroentropy.dev.
Yep.
All right. Um, Oh, and while we're on plugs, because people I know, but people are wondering why is it called Zero Entropy? Tell us.
Yeah, so I remember it was late night talking to Nicholas, and we were just like vibing around the concept of entropy. We're both like kind of nerds, physics nerds, math nerds, and so yeah, and then we just thought, hey, we should call the company Entropy. And then we were like, no, that's actually the opposite of what we're trying to do, because we don't want to bring chaos. We actually want to organize data, reduce the variability, make things more deterministic. So we should call it zero entropy, and that's just how it went. Also, it's
That's
kind of
really
funny
cool.
because in physics, like zero and absolute zero entropy like is cannot exist. So we have
Mm.
this idea of like we're doing something that's impossible. And so yeah, that's the vibe and
It's
culture.
like a unicorn.
Yeah,
It doesn't exist,
exactly.
but maybe that's the goal.
Yeah,
That's really
exactly.
cool. That's really, really cool. And so I want to sort of ask you. It's a both I think a general question about around YC, but around your specific experience as well. You're building something, or you were and you are building something. You can't really sort of build this in one evening. It's a complex system, and you go through YC, and YC, obviously everyone knows YC companies want to they YC themselves teach you, emphasize on early traction, demonstrability, validate with customers. And so how did you do that in such a short period of time? Now, you said you applied twice, so maybe actually coming into IC, you already had a working prototype. What was sort of this journey of really demonstrating the tech that it works and validating it?
Yeah. So the way that I look at this is basically it happens in cycles, right? So and you have to do everything at the same time, but you have like a build cycle, and then you have the sales cycle. And while you do the sales cycle, you're already working on like the next iteration and the next things that you want to ship. So it always happens at the same time in this cycle. So initially you don't have anything. So we did have like a time where we built one version of the product before YC. That was actually pretty helpful because we had something to show, and I think that's important. And so during YC, it was validating that it would provide value to people, and so that's what we did. And now we're ramping up on like a new iteration of the product. We'll have a lot more to share very soon, but we're really excited about the new updates that we're rolling out. And so I think that's how it should go, right? You need to like build things, validate them as you go, and that's how it was for us. And I think coming into YC with like something like a working product that could show some value was actually really good, because then we could focus on fixing bugs and selling the product.
It's interesting. It's almost you have your two brains, right? You're selling and you're already building the next iteration. And so the two have to function at the same time. This is where sometimes teams of co-founders work well. You have a developer, a CTO, and then a seller or CEO. In your case, you're both two co-founders and both highly technical. So did you one of you assume the role of just a seller and the other one of developer? Or I don't think that was the case. How did you do that? Were you both selling and both building at the same time? What was the idea, the split?
Yeah, I think in every team, it's important that one person has ownership of something. I think that's actually how you avoid like co-founder disputes and build like a healthy relationship with your co-founder, is making
Mm.
extremely clear who owns what. And then everyone needs to contribute to everything. That's obvious. But one person owns something and has like the full overview of like everything that's happening in like the most thorough detail, and really owns moving the thing forward. And so that's how we do things at Zero Entropy. Is one person has full ownership on X, Y, and Z, and there are so many things I need to work on, right? And so that's how we did things. So I owned the sales, but it didn't mean that Nick was not on like some of the sales calls, or didn't even do sales on his own. And similarly for like the engineering and the research. So that's how we do things at Zero Entropy. But given what we're building, we both need to be pretty involved with like what exactly do the customers need, and how is it going to work, and what are like the best implementations, what are the things that we need to do on the research side. So it's all like a mix, but we do have our ownerships.
Very, very cool. All right, I want to move on to a little bit of a technical deep dive. But before we move on, please, if you're watching us on YouTube, consider subscribing to the channel. If you're on your favorite podcast app, subscribe as well and give us a 5-star rating. Thank you so much. Let's keep going. So I have to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
You
and I always
should.
forget too. So now I'm so proud of myself. Like, yeah, I thought about it. All right. So how do you how would you define accuracy in retrieval? Right. Let's go back into the weeds of what you're building. How do you actually measure it, this accuracy in retrieval?
Yeah, so I have a very long answer. I have a short answer.
Okay, we have
Always
5 hours.
something
Let's go.
to give, but it's actually very difficult. So you have a bunch of metrics, but like ideally, what retrieval, like what information retrieval is basically you have a corpus, you have like a set of information, then you have one question, you have one query, and the goal is to pull the most relevant information from that corpus, that for that specific query. The difficult thing is that you need to provide like this ranked list of results, and then you have a bunch of metrics that you can look at, meaning did we pull all of the relevant results, or are there results that we didn't pull? From the results that we pull, is there like some garbage inside, like did we pull everything but also a bunch of irrelevant things? So you have like this recall and precision. But then since it's information retrieval as like a ranked list, you also have metrics that are about, did we rank the results properly? Like if I retrieve the top 50, is the most relevant answer actually in place 48, and then is the top one actually the not so relevant? So you also have metrics that are related to what is the perfect ordering. The difficult thing is that maybe for like the recall and precision, like the classification ones, that's kind of easy. Like you can binary classify, like is this response relevant or not relevant? But when it comes to the ranking, that is actually a bit more subjective. And it's a bit harder to know, like is this top one actually better than this top two? So you have like it's a bit subjective and dependent on each user. So yeah, there's a bunch of metrics that you can look at. What I suggest usually is starting with like just the binary classification ones, meaning from a query, were we able to pull the relevant information that answers that query? So recall is usually the one that you look at the most, and that's usually like, yeah, the main metric that people look at. But even that one is difficult because if you think of like internet search, right? You type a query, you get a list of results, you have no idea if like the top results are actually exactly the thing that you're looking for. It's just basically, yeah, it's relevant, like many people clicked on this, so it's, and this is linked to that, so it's pretty much likely to be relevant. If you're looking on your Slack and you're looking for that one specific message that contains exactly the thing that you're looking for, it's a kind of a different type of search, because there is one answer somewhere there
Hmm.
and you wanted to pull it as a top one result. So that makes it a bit more difficult. So
Yeah.
yeah, overall, I would say that if you're more on the second type of search where you know that there's an answer and you want to pull it up, you can start by having an evaluation set where you have a list of questions, and then you have a list of relevant information that you're trying to pull. Then you put that inside your retrieval system, and then you just compare, did my retrieval system find all of those or not? And you just have a metric, and that's how you evaluate. Usually from all of the systems that we looked at, the recall is maybe around 60 to 70%, meaning that we're getting like, yeah, 60 or 70% back, um, 60 or 70% of the results back from all of the ones that we were looking for. And usually there's also a bunch of garbage, like precision is usually very low. So in your top 100, you will have a bunch of random things. And our goal at Zero Entropy is to bring that up. and to have like 90% plus recall. So yeah.
it's it's again, it ties into what I was sort of asking about earlier of, is it difficult or is it hard to to sell? Do they realize they have a problem? Now I'm thinking to myself, if it's only 60%, I can see very clearly that my recall has a problem. It's not good at all. And then you come in and you bring it to 90 plus, perfect. It works. So you're delivering on the promise. What would you say to a founder today building a product that relies on RAG, or that does some RAG somewhere,
Mhm.
but assumes that search is not a problem, that it's not an issue? What would you say to that person?
I would just tell them to ask their users. Um, I think in some cases, if your knowledge base is super small and your questions are pretty simple, maybe the approach that you have is good enough for now. And what defines good enough? It's always a business metric. Are your users happy? Did you see any churn because of like the accuracy or the quality of the product? So I wouldn't try to like sell them on zero entropy unless they need it, right? So yeah, I would just ask them like, what do your users think? Do they think it's good enough? If so, then great. And if not, then maybe we can help.
I love it because the positioning is like, you have a better solution anyway. So when they realize that they need it, when they're ready, they'll come to you.
Yep.
That's really, really cool. What's say a tech stack or architecture choice in terms of how you built your company that made the biggest difference?
Yeah, I think leveraging LLMs and like small models at different steps of the retrieval pipeline is actually an approach that we think is really good and provides really good results. So it's almost like an agentic retrieval type of approach. I think that the main difference between now and the previous search stacks is actually the access to LLMs, and more importantly, small LLMs that are pretty fast. So instead of just like matching some keywords or doing like a broad semantic similarity between two, like a query and a corpus, now you can have an LLM look at it, and so rewriting the query using an LLM, re-ranking the results using a smaller model, actually really brings the accuracy up. And I think that's an interesting approach.
That's very cool. I want to ask you a question that I get asked almost every day now. Maybe you too, you'll tell me. But from my investors in my fund, Lobster Capital, from almost everyone I meet, the question is so the question for me is, how do you invest in AI when it's changing so quickly? And so the question for you translates to, how do you make sure your product remains relevant if we think 2 3 years down the line, maybe the models are so good that RAG by default without zero entropy just works, is at 100%? We can maybe think that's possible, maybe not. How do you make sure you still have a business by then, or is that never going to be the case? I'm sure you've thought about this as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I have many answers to that question. The first one is like, I personally don't see a world where search doesn't exist. I just have a hard time believing it. I think many of the things that we do on our day to day is like searching for information.
For sure.
Especially when like the content and is like exponentially growing like all the time, like finding what you're looking for is always going to be important. Now the question is search just going to be reading everything because the context windows are going to be really big, and maybe that's a possibility. But then again, you have like latency and cost issues, because it's quadratic with the number of tokens. So are you going to read all of PubMed um, every time you have a question about PubMed? Are you going to read all of case law every time you have a question about case law? Are you going to read every single thing you've ever written on your computer every time you're trying to ask a question? That's a question mark.
Unlikely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's unlikely. And the way that I see search, it's more like a compression algorithm. Like, of course, you want an LM at some point to look at it and make a decision, but if you give it like more relevant, higher signal content to look at, then the output is always going to be better. Um, so I personally think that yeah, search is always going to be the thing. And if there are, and that's another possibility, that there's like some architecture change in the way that like LMs are even trained, that's another possibility. Is maybe it's going to be like on an even deeper layer of the stack, having this possibility to incorporate some context. Well, I think if there's any innovation on that aspect, I mean, it will come from zero entropy, because that's our sole purpose and our sole focus, is retrieval. So we're also doing our own research and bringing the best people to work on this problem. And so that's how I think we're still going to be relevant, in the future.
Very cool. Very cool. Great, great answer. Thank you for that. Do you see a shift in how companies are nowadays? Because you're at the center of that. Do you see a shift in how companies think about infrastructure for AI? Think about how they implement LLMs, RAG, all of that stuff. My question is, companies are rushing to have some AI infra. So, they're rushing to implement some LLMs, to implement whatever the newest models are and how they can use it in their daily products. And so, because you've been selling to those companies that have problems along the way,
Mm,
mostly with retrieval, have you sort of seen a shift, an
mm,
evolution? Are they approaching it differently? What's
mm.
changing? What's new? What's coming up? Because you probably see some trends. I'm trying to uncover some trends
Yeah,
here
yeah, yeah.
that.
No, there's definitely a shift. From my perspective, at least, I felt like, in the in after the whole like AI boom, it was more like the race to implementing something, right? It was just, we need AI somewhere. We need to build something with AI. We need to stay in the race. And there was this whole like, yeah, just like going at it. And that makes sense, right? Like that's the natural reaction. I think that now more and more companies are really looking at what is the ROI of this thing that we're building. Does it actually provide like business value to our own customers and to ourselves, and is it actually working? Because now like the exploration phase of like, okay, what are the use cases is kind of done. I mean, we're still uncovering new use cases, but like in every industry, you now have like, oh, there's this use case and there's that use case, and you can build that and you can build this. And it's, I think, now more and more about, which one actually works. So I think there's like more attention paid to, the benchmarks and the accuracy, which is great for us because we think that's important. And so I definitely see this shift a bit more, when before it was more like we need to build something, that runs. So that's the shift that I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's very cool. All right, let's move on to our future bets and bold predictions about how you see the world evolving in the next few years. So, what's a contrarian take that you have on the future of LLM or AI infra?
Um, wow, that's a good question. It's difficult.
There is a lot of consensus in the space,
Yeah,
but
I think, like maybe it's not really contrarian, but I really see value in, like small models that are, super specific and specialized in one specific task. I think there's a lot of value for that, and that can be, like classification, like small classification, extraction, like all of those tiny tasks. You don't need like a bulldozer to do them. And I think with a bit of like fine tuning, like supervised fine tuning for a specific given task, I think you can, like speed up, like have like less latency than if you were using a larger model. So yeah, I don't think,
and less cost.
yeah,
Yeah,
less
that
cost.
is that is pretty contrarian because right now everybody's just raging about the OpenAI versus Anthropic war and Grok and whatever. Like this is what everybody talks about. Almost no one, at least in the media and maybe at YC is different, but almost no one is talking about those smaller models. And I agree with you. I'm actually an investor in a YC company a few batches before you, where they only have a model just for lip syncing and they just change the movement of the
Mm,
lips. And that's the only thing that they focus on. And they trained it from scratch for a few hundred thousands of dollars. And that was it with a few computers during YC. And it works extremely well. It's state of the art. And this is one of my fastest growing,
yeah.
investment. So small models, and down the line on your phone,
Yeah,
on a Raspberry Pi or whatever it is, you can just think of
yeah,
so many things. So that it is pretty constrained. I
yeah.
love that.
I mean,
Okay,
don't get me wrong. I still believe that the large models are super important, and like the reasoning capabilities are
of
like,
course. Yeah.
allowing like for brand new use cases, and yeah, that's really important too. But I think it's the combination of both.
I agree. I agree. Okay, cool. We agree. We're contrarians. That's awesome. Uh, 5 years from now, because I asked, still in the future bets and predictions, right?
Yeah.
I asked you about how you stay relevant, and I think your answer was amazing about search. But so, taking sort of a more general approach, a more general view, 5 years from now, what do you think is the stack for intelligent AI apps?
That's interesting. I think the part of that side that I'm like interested in is also like on the interface. So like all of those AI apps, I'm just wondering like what would be the interface to interact with them. I really like the voice mode of ChatGPT. I actually use
Yeah.
it for like various things, and I think that's a great interface to like um, interact with those AI apps. And I'm just wondering like will that be a more generalized and common approach to interacting with those AI systems? And yeah, I think voice is pretty cool. And in terms of the stack, I think it's likely to be somewhat similar. Like you have, I guess, like three main components. You have the intelligence layer, which is basically like the LLMs, reasoning, understanding things. Then you have like the context layer where zero entropy is. So um, basically like connecting context, improving over time with like the memory, like all of those contextualization steps. And then you have the tool use, like how do I interact with this application? How do I connect to this other API? Which tools can I use to perform my task? So I think those three layers are likely to stay, pretty much the same. And then finally, like how do you interact with this like complex system is still like a question mark, I think.
It's interesting. I hear voice mentioned more and more. I don't use it a lot. I need to get into the habit of using it more. I've used it, but it's not a sort of a thing that I do daily. What do you think of glasses? Because Zuckerberg is betting on glasses. You can have a combination of voice and, I mean, we both wear glasses first of all, but you could have voice, but then also just a few things in front of your eyes. Do you believe in that?
I would need to try it and spend more time thinking about it. I think for me, voice is what does it. More like a forcing function in the sense that it's the fastest path to an output. So you have like this vibe coding setting where you can just like talk to Super Whisperer or something like that, and it just goes into Cursor and like codes the thing for you, and you can just like think out loud. I also use
Yeah,
it
that's
to
pretty cool.
like write blog posts. Like I would talk to it for like 10-15 minutes, and it's going to like reorganize my thoughts. So for more, it's more about conveying information more easily than like getting information. I feel like the glasses would allow me to get information more easily. I'm not sure that's a need for me right now. The need for me right now is how to like explain what's on my brain to another brain. And like talking, like when you're talking to someone, like that's the easiest path. I mean, if there's a fastest path, I would love that. But it doesn't.
Neuralink, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not.
exactly. It seems like for now that's the fastest path. And so I enjoy the fact that I can do that with AI as well. So I'm maybe like a bit more bullish on that.
That's really cool. I love it. And yeah, that's what happens when you have a lot of very smart, interesting things in your brain. You gotta pour it out. So thank you. Thank God for podcasting as well. It's voice. So
Yeah, yeah,
you can watch us on YouTube, but the voice is the most important, and
yeah.
we got everything. Okay.
2x, of
Um,
course.
uh, that's interesting. I used to watch everything in 2x, and then people told me your brain doesn't have sort of the time, the silences to actually think about what's being said. It's just, you're taking everything, but you're not thinking about it. So I stopped
Hmm,
the 2x. I'm back to 1x just to take the time to have a second, third layer of thinking about what I'm listening to. So anyway,
interesting. Yeah, I usually
yeah.
like hit pause when I feel like I need to,
Yeah.
compute.
But sometimes if you're in 1x, even if you don't think, if you wouldn't have a hit pose
Mm,
necessarily,
yeah.
but it still gives you time and space to. So I was the biggest 2x guy ever, but I completely reversed that just to, because if it's listened at 2x and you don't get anything really out of it, it's a waste of the entire time. It's better to listen it slowly but actually get something out of it. Anyway, that was not the debate I wanted to have, but just sharing my 2 cents here. So if zero entropy succeeds, or if and when, what does the world look like? What's different a few years from now?
I think we're building towards like AGI, right? Like the big labs are advertising that you will have one model that can do everything, like just this super intelligence. But I do think that this intelligence requires like tool use and things like zero entropy for context. So I do think that like AGI does require better retrieval to actually be reliable and useful. So I do think that zero entropy's mission is basically building AGI, but just bringing our own brick to
Yeah, you're one of the cog in the machine, right?
yeah.
That's really cool. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah.
I love it. What is there a big idea? Is there something that you know about retrieval that most people still are sleeping on, that they haven't figured out, that they haven't realized? Because again, you're so sort of advanced in the topic. Is there something, a little nugget of wisdom you can drop on us?
Well, I hope first that this podcast gave a bit more color to the problems that we're solving. One big
It did.
idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One big idea.
You're gonna have Sam Altman calling you tomorrow and be like, "Hey, Rita, I want to build AGI. Come help me." You're gonna have an acquisition offer on your desk from OpenAI tomorrow morning, being like, "Okay, that's it. We need AGI. We need you guys." So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll build our own thing.
perfect.
um, yeah, out
Yeah.
of the blue
Any
like that. Trying to think.
That's okay. I'm asking completely out there questions. So if there's nothing, don't worry about it. We can just move on. If it comes back to you, listen, we're almost at the end of our time together. I Is there something I missed? Something you really wanted to talk about? It's also a question I've never asked before, but I think I should give you the freedom of going into a topic if you want. If there's something you really wanted to talk about and we missed, again, if there isn't, we can just move on.
No, I mean the thing I also want to say is like we stayed pretty high level, but on the technical side, what we're building is extremely challenging, and there are a lot of open questions. Also tied to the fact that humans are complicated, their preferences are complicated, and search is definitely a difficult problem. So I wanted to highlight that and just call anyone who listened to this point and who's interested in what we're building to just like reach out. We're obviously
Oh yeah.
trying to bring the best people to the team. We are getting the best people, but we want more. So if you listened until this point and you think this is cool and you're interested in understanding like more deeply what are the technical challenges that we're trying to solve, like feel free to reach out. And that's something that I wanted to put out
That's really cool. You should. And by the way, like, Rita is amazing to work with, and you've
there.
been pretty modest throughout this whole thing. But you went through YC. You personally went to Polytechnique, I think, in France, and Berkeley, and like amazing, founding team. So yes, you should absolutely. If this speaks to you, you should absolutely reach out to Rita. It's perfect because actually, towards the end of the episode, which is right now, I wanted to ask, where can people find you, reach out? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so our website, ZeroEntropy.dev. If you want to reach out to us, it's founders at ZeroEntropy.dev. So feel free to reach out there. I'm also available on Twitter, on LinkedIn. So yeah, just drop me a DM. And yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. That's it. Rita, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had an absolute blast. Best of, Godspeed for Zero Entropy, and thank you so much for answering my questions.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was awesome. To our listeners, if you're still here, well, thank you so much for staying until the end. Please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. You can see our beautiful faces, and I'll see you next week for our next episode. Until next time, I'll see you. Bye, everyone.